keeping the lights on? I'm drowning." She grabbed my hand across the hospital cafeteria table, her grip tight and trembling. "You're the only one who can save Mom. I'm useless right now." I believed her. I was 31 years old, and like an absolute fool, I drained my entire life savings, every cent I had scraped together for a down payment on a condo, to pay for our mother's emergency heart valve replacement. 3 weeks later, while I was eating instant ramen to save money on groceries, I found a document in the glove compartment of my sister's car that made my blood run cold. It wasn't an overdue bill. It wasn't a foreclosure notice. It was a closing disclosure for a $1.2 million beach house in panicked, pristine cash. Before I tell you exactly how I exposed her fraud in front of the entire family and got every single penny back with interest, please subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. I'm curious to see how far this story travels. My name is Audrey Bennett. I'm a paralegal at a mid-sized firm in Chicago. I'm the kind of person who double-checks receipts, keeps a detailed budget spreadsheet, and drives a Honda Civic with 140,000 miles on it because it's sensible. My older sister, Kendall, has always been the free spirit, the entrepreneur. She runs a boutique marketing agency that she constantly claims is one bad month away from bankruptcy. For years, our family dynamic has been set in stone. I'm the stable, boring one who handles the logistics. Kendall is the chaotic, lovable dreamer who needs help with rent every other Thanksgiving. Everything changed on a Tuesday in November. My mother, who is 64 and practically the backbone of our small family, collapsed in her kitchen. The diagnosis was severe aortic stenosis. She needed a valve replacement immediately. The problem wasn't the surgery itself, it was the insurance. Mom had a bargain bin policy that covered the basics, but had a catastrophic gap for out-of-network specialists, and the only surgeon available to operate that week was, of course, out-of-network. The hospital financial counselor sat us down in a beige office that smelled like antiseptic and stale coffee and slid a piece of paper across the desk. The estimated out-of-pocket cost for the surgery, the 5-day ICU stay, and the initial rehabilitation was $58,450.22, and they needed a substantial deposit up front. I remember staring at that number. $58,000. It was a fortune, but it was Mom. I looked at Kendall. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a tracksuit that looked worn out. She started crying immediately. "I can't do it," she sobbed. "Audrey, my business account is overdrawn. I just had a client fire me. I have $400 to my name. If I pay anything, I'll be evicted next week." She looked so small, so defeated. I felt a wave of protective guilt wash over me. I was the one with the steady paycheck. I was the one with the savings account I'd been building since I was 22. "It's okay," I said, my voice shaking just a little. "I'll handle it." Kendall looked up, her eyes wide with gratitude. "Are you sure?" "That's your house money." "Mom needs a heart," I said. "A house can wait." I went to the bank that afternoon. I wired $45,000 from my savings and put the rest on a high-interest credit card. I felt nauseous watching the balance hit zero, but I told myself it was the right thing to do. Family comes first. Money is just money. I had no idea that while I was signing those transfer papers, Kendall was finalizing a wire transfer of her own, except hers wasn't going to a hospital. The month following Mom's surgery was the hardest of my life. The operation was successful, thank God, but the recovery was brutal. Mom couldn't lift anything heavier than a milk jug, she couldn't drive, and she needed help getting up and down the stairs. Since I had declared myself the capable one, the burden of caretaking fell entirely on me. I moved into Mom's spare bedroom, sleeping on a lumpy mattress that smelled like mothballs. I woke up every 4 hours to manage her pain medication. I coordinated the physical therapy appointments, fought with the insurance company over denied claims for her prescriptions, and cooked every meal. And I did all of this while working my full-time job remotely from her kitchen table, terrified that if I missed a deadline, I'd lose the income I now desperately needed to pay off the credit card debt I'd taken on. My finances were in ruins. I canceled my gym membership. I canceled Netflix and Spotify. I stopped buying coffee. I ate whatever was in Mom's pantry, mostly expired cans of soup and saltines, because I couldn't afford to buy my own groceries. Every time I looked at my bank app, I felt a physical weight on my chest. I calculated that it would take me 6 years to rebuild what I had spent in one afternoon. Kendall, meanwhile, was the queen of emotional support. She would swing by the house once or twice a week, usually empty-handed, and sit by Mom's bed holding her hand and sighing. "I wish I could do more," she'd say, looking tragically at the ceiling. "I feel so guilty that Audrey has to do all the heavy lifting. But with the business failing, I'm barely keeping my head above water." She would complain about her own hardships while I was scrubbing the bathroom or changing Mom's bandages. "My landlord raised the rent again," Kendall moaned one evening while eating the dinner I had cooked. "I might have to move into a studio. It's so humiliating." Mom would look at her with such pity. "Oh, honey, don't worry. As soon as I'm better, maybe I can help you out." That made my blood boil. Here was Mom, chest stapled shut, worrying about Kendall's rent while I was literally drowning in debt to keep Mom alive. But I bit my tongue. I told myself that Kendall was just struggling, that she was doing her best in her own way. There were red flags, though, small ones I was too exhausted to see clearly. One afternoon, Kendall showed up wearing a new pair of boots. When I asked about them, she quickly said, "Thrift store, can you believe it? $5. Another time, she brought Mom a get-well gift, a cashmere blanket that felt incredibly expensive. "A client gave it to me years ago," she claimed. "I finally took it out of the packaging." I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. If I didn't, the resentment would have eaten me alive. The breaking point of my patience came in early December. The medical bills for the post-op rehab started arriving, and there was another $4,200 due that hadn't been in the original estimate. I called Kendall, desperate. "Ken, I can't cover this one," I said, fighting back tears. "My credit card is maxed. I need you to chip in. Even just $500, anything." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, Kendall let out a heavy, dramatic sigh. "Audrey, you know I would if I could. I literally had to sell my laptop yesterday just to pay my electric bill. I'm typing this on my phone. I have negative $40 in my checking account." She sounded so convincing, so broken. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm such a failure of a sister." I ended up apologizing to her. I felt bad for pressuring her when she was clearly at rock bottom. I took out a payday loan, a predatory, awful loan with an insane interest rate to cover the rehab bill. I told myself we were in this together, fighting against the world. I was wrong. We weren't fighting the world. I was fighting alone, and she was watching from the sidelines, laughing. It happened on a Tuesday, 3 days before Christmas. Mom was finally mobile enough to be left alone for a few hours, and I had returned to my own apartment to check my mail and water my half-dead plants. My phone rang. It was Kendall. "Audrey, disaster," she said, her voice breathless. "I'm in Denver for a client pitch, my last desperate attempt to save the agency, and I left my car at the airport. I just realized I left my house keys in the glove box. My neighbor needs to get in to feed my cat, but the spare key is locked in the car." She asked if I could drive to the airport, use the spare fob she kept at Mom's house to open her car, retrieve her house keys, and drop them off with her neighbor. It was a huge hassle, especially since I was exhausted, but she framed it as a life or death favor for her cat, Mr. Whiskers. "Please, Audrey, I can't afford a locksmith. I literally can't afford it." I drove to the airport parking garage, found her beat-up 2018 Toyota Camry, and clicked the unlock button. The car was a mess. Fast food wrappers, old coffee cups, gym clothes scattered in the back. It fit the struggling artist narrative perfectly. I opened the glove box to find the house keys. They were buried under a stack of napkins and tire gauge. As I dug them out, a thick, heavy envelope slid out with them. It was a FedEx package, ripped open, with the label "Urgent Do Not Bend" stamped in red. I shouldn't have looked. It wasn't my business. But the return address caught my eye: Coastal Premier Title Agency, Emerald Isle, NC. Kendall had never mentioned knowing anyone in North Carolina. Curiosity got the better of me. I pulled out the stack of papers inside. The top document was a HUD-1 settlement statement. I'm a paralegal. I look at these forms for a living. I know exactly what they are. I scanned the lines, my brain struggling to comprehend what I was seeing. Borrower, Kendall J. Bennett. Property address, 4402 Ocean View Drive, Emerald Isle, NC. Purchase price, $1,250,000. Loan amount, $0. Cash from borrower, $1,254,300.22. The date on the settlement statement was November 18th, 2 days after Mom's surgery, 2 days after I had wired my life savings to the hospital, 2 days after Kendall had sat in that cafeteria crying about having $400 to her name. I stood there in the freezing parking garage, my breath fogging up the air, reading the document over and over again. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was a different Kendall Bennett. But no, there was her signature, that loopy, distinctive K I had seen on birthday cards my whole life. I flipped to the next page. It was a copy of a cashier's check. A check for over $1 million, drawn from an account at a private wealth management firm I had never heard of. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. I leaned against the cold concrete wall of the garage, trying not to vomit. She had bought a luxury beach house, in cash, while I was eating expired soup and ruining my credit score to save our mother's life. I took out my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped it twice. I took high-resolution photos of every single page. The deed, the settlement statement, the check copy, the tax declarations. I photographed the envelope. I even photographed the interior of her messy car to prove where I found it. Then I carefully put the papers back exactly how I found them, locked the car, and drove away. I didn't go to the neighbor's house. I texted Kendall, "Got the keys. Neighbor has them. Good luck in Denver." Then I drove straight to my office, unlocked the door, and started the most important investigation of my career. I spent the next 48 hours in a state of cold, calculated fury. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. I sat at my dual monitor setup at the law firm, using every skip tracing tool and public record database I had access to. I needed to know everything. I needed to know how deep the lie went. First, I ran a corporate search on Kendall's failing marketing agency. It turns out, the agency didn't exist. It had been dissolved 2 years ago. Instead, I found an LLC registered in her name, KJB Digital Holdings. I pulled the financials. It wasn't a marketing agency. It was a dropshipping empire. She had been selling cheap home goods and fitness supplements online, funneling the profits through 3 different shell companies to minimize her tax liability. The client pitch in Denver? A lie. Her credit card statements, which I managed to access because she had foolishly used my email as a backup recovery address years ago, showed she was actually at a 5-star ski resort in Aspen. I pulled the transaction history. On the day she told me she had to sell her laptop to pay her electric bill, she had spent $450 at a spa and $210 on a steak dinner. On the day I took out the payday loan to cover Mom's rehab, Kendall had transferred $15,000 into a high-yield savings account titled Renovation Fund. The math was sickening. In the last calendar year, her net income was just over $680,000. She wasn't just comfortable, she was wealthy. She had been hoarding money while watching me destroy my financial future, all to play the role of the starving artist so she wouldn't be expected to contribute. It was pathological. It was financial abuse. I printed everything. I created a binder. I organized it chronologically. Tab 1, Mom's medical bills and my wire transfers. Tab 2, text messages from Kendall claiming poverty. I have negative $40. Tab 3, Kendall's actual bank statements from those same dates showing balances of $100K plus dollars. Tab 4, the beach house deed and closing documents. Tab 5, photos from her social media, from her secret private account I found by cross-referencing her phone number, showing her work trips were actually luxury vacations. I had enough evidence to sue her, but a lawsuit would take years, and it wouldn't undo the emotional damage. I wanted something more immediate. I wanted her to feel the shame I had been carrying. Mom was scheduled to have a welcome-home family dinner on Christmas Eve. It was going to be small, just me, Kendall, Mom, and our Aunt Sarah and Uncle Mike. It was the perfect venue. I called Mom and told her I wanted to handle the entertainment. I put together a slideshow of photos from the last few years, I lied. Just some memories to celebrate you being home. Mom was touched. That sounds lovely, Audrey. Kendall said she's bringing the appetizers. She said she could only afford chips and salsa, but it's the thought that counts. I almost crushed the phone in my hand. Yeah, I said, my voice steady. It's definitely the thought that counts. I arrived at Mom's house 2 hours early on Christmas Eve. I set up my laptop and connected it to the large 65-inch television in the living room. I tested the HDMI connection. I checked the audio. I made sure the presentation was queued up and ready to launch with a single click. When Kendall arrived, she made a big show of struggling with 2 bags of generic potato chips and a jar of salsa. She hugged Mom, tears in her eyes again. "I'm just so happy you're okay," she sniffled. "I got you a card. I couldn't afford a gift this year, but I wrote a poem." I watched her from the kitchen doorway, sipping my wine. She looked at me and smiled that sad martyr smile she had perfected. "Hey Audrey, you look tired, you should really rest more." "I will," I said, smiling back. "After tonight, I'm going to sleep like a baby." Dinner was tense, mostly because I was vibrating with adrenaline. Kendall spent the entire meal talking about how humbling this year had been for her. "It really teaches you what matters," she said, spooning mashed potatoes onto her plate. "Money comes and goes, but family is forever. I may be broke, but I feel rich in love." Aunt Sarah nodded sympathetically. "You've always had such a good spirit, Kendall. It's a shame about the business." "I know," Kendall sighed. "I'm thinking of applying for jobs at Starbucks next week, just to make rent." I put down my fork. The metal clinked loudly against the china. "Actually," I said, standing up, "speaking of looking back on the year, I prepared a little slideshow. Since we're all together, I thought it would be a good time to watch it." Mom clapped her hands. "Oh, wonderful, let's move to the living room." We all shuffled over to the couches. Kendall sat right next to Mom, holding her hand. I stood by the TV, my laptop open on the coffee table. "So," I began, my voice clear and calm, "this year has been hard. Mom's surgery was a terrifying ordeal, and financially, it nearly broke us. I know Kendall has been sharing a lot about her struggles, and I wanted to highlight that." I hit the spacebar. The screen lit up. The first slide wasn't a family photo. It was a screenshot of the text message Kendall sent me on November 15th. "I swear, Audrey, I have $400 to my name. If I pay anything, I'll be evicted." The room went quiet. "Audrey, what is this?" Kendall asked, a nervous laugh bubbling up. "Is this a joke?" "No joke," I said. "Next slide." The screen changed. It was a bank statement from KJB Digital Holdings dated November 15th. The ending balance was highlighted in bright yellow, $842,000. Kendall froze. Her face drained of color so fast she looked like a ghost. "Where did you get that?" she hissed, standing up. "Turn it off." "Sit down, Kendall," I said. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I sounded like I was reading a court deposition. Next slide. The screen flashed to the hospital bill, $58,450.22. Then immediately next to it, my savings account withdrawal receipt showing my balance dropping to zero. "I paid for Mom's heart," I said. "I took out a payday loan at 28% interest to cover the rehab. I ate ramen for 6 weeks." "Audrey, stop," Kendall shouted, lunging for the laptop. Uncle Mike stood up and blocked her path. He looked confused but serious. "Let her finish, Kendall." I hit the key again. The piece de resistance, the deed. The 65-inch screen was filled with the HUD-1 settlement statement. 4402 Ocean View Drive, Emerald Isle, NC, cash purchase, $1,250,000. Date, November 18th. While Mom was in the ICU, I said, looking directly at my mother who was staring at the screen with her mouth open, Kendall wasn't broke. She was buying a vacation home. She paid cash. She has over $1 million in liquid assets, and she let me ruin my life to pay for your surgery because she didn't want to dip into her renovation fund. I clicked one last time. It was a photo from her secret Instagram account dated 3 days ago. Kendall holding a glass of champagne on a balcony overlooking the ocean. Caption, "New year, new view, blessed beach life." The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating. Mom slowly turned her head to look at Kendall. The look on her face wasn't anger. It was heartbreak. "Kendall," Mom whispered. "Is that true?" Kendall looked around the room, panic in her eyes. The trapped animal had nowhere to go. "Mom, it's an investment," she stammered, her voice pitching up. "I did it for us. I was going to surprise you. It's complicated corporate finance. Audrey doesn't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said. "You claimed poverty to avoid helping your dying mother so you could buy a beach house. That's not finance, that's fraud." For a solid 10 seconds, nobody moved. Then the dam broke. Kendall tried to spin it. "You hacked me. This is an invasion of privacy. I'm going to sue you," she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Go ahead," I said, crossing my arms. "Discovery will be fun. I have 300 pages of forensic accounting on my hard drive right now. I know about the shell companies. I know about the tax evasion on the dropshipping income." "Do you really want to bring the IRS into this?" The mention of the IRS shut her up instantly. She collapsed onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands, sobbing. But this time, nobody comforted her. Mom stood up, shaky but standing on her own. She walked over to the TV, looked at the numbers one last time, and then turned to Kendall. "You watched your sister starve," Mom said, her voice trembling with a rage I had never heard before. "You watched me cry about money. You brought me chips and salsa, and you had $1 million in the bank. I was scared," Kendall wailed. "I worked hard for that money. Why should I have to spend it just because?" She stopped, realizing what she was about to say. Just because you got sick. Get out, Mom said quietly. Mom, please. Get out, Mom screamed, pointing at the door. Get out of my house. Kendall scrambled to gather her purse. She looked at me with pure venom. You happy now? You ruined everything. You ruined it yourself, I said. By the way, check your email. I sent you an invoice. Kendall fled. The door slammed and the silence returned. Aunt Sarah was pouring a very large glass of wine. Mom sat down and wept, and I held her, but I wasn't done. The next morning, I sent Kendall a formal demand letter via courier. It outlined the total cost of Mom's medical care, the interest on my credit cards, the fees for the payday loan, and a calculated amount for the caregiving services I had provided while she was working. The total came to $74,500. I attached a draft of a complaint for a civil lawsuit for unjust enrichment and fraudulent misrepresentation, and I also included a pre-filled tip form for the IRS whistleblower program. The note attached was simple: wire the full amount to my account by Friday at 5:00 p.m. or I mail the tax fraud tip and file the lawsuit. She didn't fight it. She knew I had her cornered. On Friday at 3:45 p.m., my phone pinged. A wire transfer for $74,500 hit my account. She also sent a long, rambling email blaming me for her stress, but I didn't read past the first line. I transferred the money immediately, paid off the payday loan, paid off the credit cards, and replenished my savings account. I didn't stop there. I sat down with Mom and we restructured her will. Kendall was removed as the executor. Any inheritance was placed into a trust that Kendall couldn't touch. We haven't seen her since Christmas Eve. Rumor has it she's actually living in that beach house now because she's too embarrassed to show her face in town. As for me, I'm debt-free. My credit score is recovering. And last weekend, I finally bought my own place. It's not a beach house. It's a nice 2-bedroom condo in the city with a balcony and a great view. And the best part? I bought it with my own money and I sleep perfectly soundly at night. I learned a valuable lesson that winter. Blood might be thicker than water, but it's not thicker than a bank statement. If someone tells you they're broke but their lifestyle doesn't match, believe the receipts, not the tears. If you enjoyed this story of financial justice, please hit that like button and subscribe for more. And let me know in the comments, would you have reported her to the IRS anyway? I still think about it sometimes. Thanks for watching.